May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Every time I've read this gospel from Matthew, it actually occurs in Mark as well, about the call of those first 4 disciples, I have to confess that I've always been extremely skeptical. I just could not quite imagine that James and John and Peter and Andrew would just drop everything in their life and go herring off after some guy. If you think about it, I mean, these were men who were married, they had children, they had families, they lived together, and yet they're supposed to just suddenly leave everything that they know, leave their families, leave their homes, and go wandering off after this guy named Jesus that had some rumors spread about him and his abilities and his power. It always seemed to me that that was probably something terrifically irresponsible, and why would anybody possibly do it? But then a number of years ago, I had an experience that really transformed the way I looked at this passage and thought about it. My last year of seminary, I was a student advisor for a group of first-year students. And one of the students who was in my group was a young man named Emmanuel. And Emmanuel was Ugandan. And he had earned a bachelor's degree in theology in Uganda and was an ordained priest there. He had been working as a priest for a number of years. He served a whole bunch of small parishes, and he used to travel around to the parishes. And his bishop had called him for a meeting one day and said, "Emmanuel, I want to set up a school to teach lay people and clergy ministry and to serve and teach them the Bible and theology. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to the United States, and I want you to earn your master's degree at the Episcopal Divinity School in Boston." Emmanuel had a wife. He had 3 children. He lived in a village where his parents lived. He had a life. And when he left to come to the United States, there was absolutely no guarantee that he was going to go home again during those 3 years. And in fact, he wasn't expecting to go home. The bishop had told him that there were not funds to bring him back and forth from Uganda to the United States. But the bishop asked him to go earn his master's degree and then come back and help him set up this school. And so when I met Emmanuel, he had been in the United States for all of about 2 weeks. And he had left everything that he knew, all the people who were precious to him, to come to a different country, a different place, different people, by far a different climate as it got colder and colder that fall in Boston. But I had the privilege of spending time with Emmanuel and in conversation with him. And one day our group finally looked at him and said, "Why did you come? Why did you?" And he said, "My bishop asked me, and I believe God called me to come to the United States and to learn with you and to earn my degree. Because when I go back to my own country, I will be able to preach the gospel so much better, and I will be able to teach my people in a way that I can't teach them now." And it didn't matter to him. Well, it did matter to him. But he was willing to sacrifice leaving his home and his family to come to the United States because he felt like God had called him to do that. I can't imagine doing that. I had such admiration for him and his courage and his willingness to follow this call, to leave all that was familiar. And so now whenever I hear this bit of the gospel of the calling of those disciples, I always think of Emmanuel and his courage and his willingness and his faithfulness to God's call to Him. Now, each of us has experienced God's call in one way or another. Each of us has experienced God's call in what we do in our life outside of St. Stephen's. We've all experienced God's call in our community life together. And the way in which we choose to come together and live our community life is each of us responding to God's call, both individually and together. And as we get ready for our annual meeting today, our annual meeting is all about God's call to us. The way in which God is calling us as a community to bring in a bit of the kingdom. The way God is calling us to be a beacon of light in the Santa Clarita Valley. The way in which God is calling us to reach out to our neighbors. To those we know and those we don't. To those who are in despair. All that we do together in our community life is all about God's call to us. And the way in which we as individuals and as a whole group of people choose to live out that call. So as the year progresses this year, I'm thinking about some ways that we are going to live out God's call to us. Some of the ways are going to be through our outreach. And we have 2 new outreach initiatives that are going to begin this year. One is a partnership with Bridge to Home, even more than we already partner with them. They are starting a new program called Families to Home. And what they are doing is trying to find faith communities who will come together and support a family as they move from homelessness into being housed. It's one thing to get an apartment, but if that apartment has no furniture and no beds and no pots and pans and no sheets and no plates and towels, it's really hard to live. It's really hard to get up and go to work every day when you come back to a place where there is nothing. And so this initiative is going to invite faith communities to come together and to support a family, both financially and just with the call to see how people are, to help people settle into their new homes, to help make their transition into what is hopefully a new place in life for them a little bit easier. A way in which God is calling us to reach out to our neighbors. And Ken Higginbotham and I are working on a project about how we might serve our veterans. There are so many men and women coming back from war that need support and assistance. All you have to do is read the newspaper very often and you know that the suicide rate among our soldiers is higher than it's ever been. And those coming back from war are facing challenges that I think most of us probably have a hard time imagining. And after all that these people have sacrificed, at the very least, we can turn around and seek to support them and hold them up. What we're looking for are the places that are not yet being cared for. Those things that are falling through the safety net. Asking ourselves the question, how can we support those returning veterans? Your adult formation committee is starting to think about new ways of all of us learning together as Christ's people. Is the way that our adult formation been going on Sunday mornings working well for us or not working well for us? Are there better ways for us to come together and spend some time working on our spiritual lives, learning more, gaining more, so that we, like Emmanuel, can go and share what we've learned? And so you may start to see something that looks really different and sounds very different from what we've been doing for the last year or so. We're planning the first Sunday of March a Celtic service with Celtic musicians here, there'll still be a Eucharist, but the language will be different, the music will be different, ways to enliven our souls and our spirits, ways to enliven our worship as we go forth from this place to proclaim the good news. Our youth are getting ready, and will be getting ready for another mission trip. If you had a chance to watch their video from last year, it was a profound experience, both for the youth and for the adults who went. So this is my plug for adults. If you want to go on a mission trip with our youth this summer, please see me, because we can always use adult mentors. We can especially use men adult mentors. There were 3 women who went last summer, and not that a fine job was not done, but I think it would have been helpful to have a man helping to mentor our youth on that trip. There are so many ways in which God is inviting us to live out our call, both individually and as a community. There are so many ways that we are invited to live out that call here. So where is God calling you this year? Where and how are you going to live out your call here? Where is God inviting you? Because like the apostles this morning, God calls us that clearly, that profoundly, and just says, come and follow me. Come and find out what's going to happen. Come and serve those that we come in contact with here, and those that we come in contact with outside of here. Come and live into the call as God's people. Amen.